DreAllDay.com.
Topic today, why violence is a great thing. Yes, violence is a great thing. Now, sometimes you will hear somebody, usually it's a woman, but often it can be more increasingly, it's become some feminine energy man saying some stupid shit like violence is never right under any circumstances, or there should never be violence, or I don't condone violence, or I'm condemning violence, or I'm against any and all kinds. This is the kind of stupid shit you hear people saying. I'm against any and all kinds of violence, no matter the reason. This is a completely ridiculous thing for anyone to say. And when I put it into context here in today's episode, both logically and rationally, as always, you understand why, as usual, I know exactly what I'm talking about and why it will make perfect sense for you to adopt this mindset, even if you have been taught some stupid shit before this, like the stuff that I just gave you as an example. So this is not a person thinking in their right mind, anyone who has the idea that violence is a bad thing. Violence is an amazing thing. It is a useful thing. And most importantly, it is a necessary thing. Okay. After I say what I have to say here today, it will make perfect sense to you. So let's get into what it is that I have to say so it can start making that perfect sense to you. Point number one, today's topic once again is why violence is a great thing. Point number one, violence is the bottom line of all human communication. I want you to digest the point that I just said and really think about that. Violence is the bottom line of all human communication. Every interaction between two human beings is founded on either violence itself or the underlying, lingering potential for violence. Every engagement between two human beings, this is the foundation of the engagement. Now, you may be saying, Dre, what the hell do you mean the foundation of every engagement? You're saying when I walk through the hallway in my office building at where I work and I pass a coworker who I don't know, but I've seen before, and I say hello and they say hello, you're saying that there's some undercurrent of potential violence there? And the answer is yes. When two men have a conversation, as opposed to, let's say, women and children having a conversation, let's just say two men. It is especially true with men that men are always sizing each other up subconsciously, if not consciously, sizing each other up in the process of having a conversation. Why do we do this? And I'm not talking about just any kind of conversation or argument or confrontation. I'm talking any form of communication. Two men could just be shaking hands and saying hello, and they just met each other at a cocktail party. Something as simple as me paying for gas at the gas station counter. That man is sizing me up and I'm sizing him up. Or I'm standing in line at the gas station. There's a guy in front of me. There's a guy behind me, and they're both noticing me and I'm noticing them. Why? You're sizing up that other man. Why? Because men understand that if two men get into a situation in which we cannot communicate amicably, verbally, then we end up having to communicate physically. And every man who has, most men have testosterone as opposed to estrogen, is capable of physical violence. Women are capable as well, but it's much more man's domain is to be physically violent. Now, again, whether we're going to be violent with hands or we're going to be violent with weapons, what I mean here is, I want you all to understand this, is not that everywhere a man goes, let's say myself, it's not like everywhere I go, I'm like, all right, I might beat this guy up or this guy might beat me up. I'm not consciously thinking of this, but subconsciously, we're always taking stock of who are the other men in our space, because the most dangerous person is the man. Even if everybody had a weapon, the most dangerous person is the man, because the man's the one who most likely is to use the weapon. Even if we all had a gun, a woman could take a man's life with a gun the same way a man could take a woman's life with a gun, but a man is more likely to use the gun and is probably a more accurate shooter than a woman is, just by virtue of being a man. All right, this is the way it works. And again, this is not me just talking my opinion. This is biologically the way that it works. The best shooters of guns, even in like target shooting where people do this competitively, men are the best shooters. Driving, men are the best drivers. It doesn't matter how many muscles you have, whether you can shoot a gun or drive a car. Why are men the best? Because men are biologically designed to be this. And on a level where biology really matters, like physical altercation, men are most capable. If all women, children, and men got into three different groups and we're all going to fight against each other, the children would get decimated, the women get decimated, and only be the men left fighting against each other. If anybody, the battle will be over in less than a minute. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? And men are always sizing each other up because the bottom line, if we can't solve things any other way, then we solve things physically. That's the way it works. Now, some of you may say, well, Jay, we're in a polite society. We're in a civilized society. People aren't just running up on each other and beating each other up in the streets anymore. What the hell are you talking about? Why are you saying something like this? Well, and the first half of that is correct. People are not just beating each other up in the streets. We are in polite society, but understand that when polite society is no longer succeeding, what happens? There's battles. What's happening in the world right now? If you follow geopolitics, you only have to follow it. You know that there are some physical confrontations happening right now. And when I say physical, again, I don't necessarily mean a boxing match. A physical confrontation can be my country shooting missiles at your country. That is a physical confrontation. We are physically getting our point across because for whatever reason, me or you or somebody decided we couldn't do this verbally. Do you understand? Violence is the bottom line of all communication. If the United States can't get along with Canada, and us and Canada are negotiating, and we decide we can't handle this verbally, eventually we're going to handle it physically. And somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. And some lives are going to be lost in the process. That's what happens when people can't handle things with words. There's one reason why your communication skills verbally need to be really sharp. And that's for all of you out there, because you can get a lot more done through communication with other people than you can get done doing everything on your own through your muscles. If you can get other people on your side, knowing you, liking you, and trusting you. Yet at the same time, and I always say this to men should be capable of physical violence. Every man listening to this should be physically capable of violence. Doesn't mean you got to be able to beat somebody up. You don't want to fight anybody, or maybe for whatever reason you can't, go get yourself a license, get yourself a gun. You need to be able to inflict violence on another man. Why? Because you're going to come across other people who could possibly do it to you. And if you can't do it, and they know you can't, and they know you won't, more importantly, then you're going to get taken advantage of. Again, you have enough life experience. You know this is true. Maybe you've had it happen to you, unfortunately. Maybe you've seen it happen to others. I'm sure you have. This is the way life works. We're going to get more into that as we keep going. Every man who has testosterone, we all need to be, and we all already are at our base level, capable of physical violence. Again, every man understands that if you go too far in a verbal communication with another man, that other man may have a line crossed that he doesn't want you to cross verbally. And different men have different lines. Certain men, they're okay with you saying certain things towards them. Other men, you say the exact same thing to a different man. That man might want to punch you in the face, which is why you need to be very careful in your communication and who you're talking to, and why you need to size up the people you're talking to so you know what line you can cross with certain people, or if there even is a line. And other people, let me be careful not to go that far because I don't know how this person might react. You need to know that. And if you fail in that, then you may end up having to get into a physical altercation that you didn't even expect to get into because you thought you could talk to somebody one way because it worked with the last guy you were talking to, but it doesn't work with this guy. And again, this is all part of communication, folks. Reading and understanding what's actually happening is just as much a part of communication as what you say and what you export, also what you import, if you get what I'm saying. So if you as a man do not think you can survive or win a physical altercation with another man, or the verbal communication is not going right, you probably know you need to somehow fix the verbal communication before it goes to the next level. Because you're like, all right, I know I can't beat this guy in a fight. And if we get in a fight, I know I'm probably gonna get my ass kicked. And I don't want to get my ass kicked right now. So how about I figure out a way to verbally ameliorate this situation before it gets worse, because I don't want it to get worse. And if you size up the man you're dealing with as it being that, then hey, that's what you do. Survival. That's survival skills. Fight, flight, or freeze. Also, if you believe that you could win, or you believe that maybe it'll be an even fight and you're not afraid to take it, then you say whatever it is you want to say, and it goes wherever you want it to go. Men who have a little bit more testosterone tend to go that way in the way they talk to people, even when they're dealing with people in person. I'm not just talking on the internet. The internet's a different animal where there's less accountability. I'm talking in real life here. This idea also applies in the minds of women and children. It's just that some children are raised to believe that they are above this standard until they get to a point in their life where they realize that they were wrong. And the same thing happens with women. Let me tell you what I mean. I told you all this story when I told you about the birth of my first child, when I was in a neonatal intensive care unit at Jackson Hospital in Miami. And I was communicating in a tone and with an energy that it was very clear the way I was communicating that things are going to go a certain way. And I was making it clear to all the nurses in there and the head physician, head doctor, whatever the hell their title is, inside of this NICU, also known as the neonatal intensive care unit. This doctor was this young white woman, young for a doctor. She's probably 35, maybe less than that. And she was talking to me with a forceful type of tone that the energy that she was giving off told me that she came from a world in which a girl could say anything she wants to a boy because there is no verbal line that a girl can cross at which a boy will not get physical with the girl. The way she was communicating was as if she came from that world. That's just what I picked up in her energy. And I wasn't going to punch the woman in the mouth, but what concerned me, and I still, even to this day, my son is, by the time you hear this, my son is close to 3 years old, that this woman comes from a world where she thinks she could just say anything to a man. The problem is she works in a hospital where anybody comes to the hospital. It's not like you're just living in your neighborhood. Anybody can come to a hospital for whatever reason, and everybody comes from a different place. She had no idea who I was. What if I was not from that world where boys usually don't hit girls no matter what the girl says? I am generally of that mindset. I am of that mindset. But I'm from a neighborhood where I saw boys punch girls in the mouth the same way they would punch a boy in the mouth, just because the girl said the wrong thing to the boy. And she has no idea if I was one of those people. But she was talking as if she believed those people don't exist. That's the concern that I had for that doctor, because one day she's going to approach a man with that type of energy, and the man's going to rearrange the teeth in her mouth because of what she said out of her mouth. And again, I'm not saying to the women that you should expect a man to punch you in the mouth, but I also say you better be careful who you're talking to, because you don't know who you're talking to, especially when you're talking to people who you've never met. You don't know where they're from, and you don't know what to think. You got to be careful who you're talking to, folks. Especially if you are not physically capable of defending yourself in a fist fight, you better be careful how you talk to people, because somebody else might take it there if they don't like the way that you're talking, or they don't like your energy, or they don't like something that came out of your mouth. This is how the real world works, in case any of you didn't know. So any of you under the age of 30 who's been raised on the internet, where you could just say anything crazy and get away with it, quote unquote, because you can't be directly held accountable by somebody you're talking to through a phone. Understand, when you're talking to someone in real life, these kind of things happen. That's why you need to get off the phone and get out in real life and get some real life experience. I am from a world where, as I said, I've seen women get punched in their face by men for something that they said, and punched as if they were punching a man. I'm not saying I'm the man who would do it, but again, there are women who talk as if they don't think it's possible for this to happen. I'm letting all of you know it's possible. And men definitely should know that this is possible. And you come across a person who, again, lives a different lifestyle and they have a different code of ethics. You may think that they're wrong for punching you in the face. It doesn't mean you didn't get punched in the face. It doesn't mean your mouth's not bleeding. It doesn't mean your nose is not broken. Now, I'm not even saying that this violence would be justified. Now, let's say I was a guy from let's say I was from 2 blocks away from where I am from, and I was raised a little bit different than how I was, and that doctor was talking to me the way she was talking to me, and I decided to punch that bitch in her mouth. Let's just say that I did that, okay? I'm not saying I would be justified. I'm not saying I probably wouldn't have gotten arrested or had to go to court for a battery charge, but that doesn't change the fact that that doctor got punched in her face, and that's probably going to traumatize her for the rest of her career. The next time she approaches a man and decides to start to get testy with her mouth, she probably would think a little bit differently about how she talks. What do you think? And again, I'm not even saying it's justified. I'm just saying, would that happen? The answer is, of course it would happen. And anybody who's listening to this, who's ever been punched in the face, and if you're a man, you've never been punched in the face, you should get that experience. Go to a boxing gym or something, and you can get a sanction. You can get beat up in a sanctioned way. But if you've never been punched in the face, then you don't know. You don't have the visceral experience that tells you should be careful how you choose your words when you're talking to somebody, especially somebody you don't know. That's the point here. Chris Rock talked about this in one of his comedy specials. You can find it on Netflix. I forget the name of it. But one of the things Chris Rock talks about is that if you've never been punched in the face before, then you don't understand modulating your tone. You don't understand checking the way you use words. You don't understand checking your nonverbal cues when you're talking to somebody, because if you think you can just get away with anything, if you never had the experience of not being able to get away with anything, then you might think that things just go a certain way until at some point in your life, you might be 12, you might be 27, you might be 42. When you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, you get punched in the mouth, and you never thought that could happen. So if your verbal communication tendencies, I'm talking to everyone listening to this, men, women, children, if your verbal communication tendencies borderline on recklessness, i.e. you are of this belief that you can just talk to anybody any way that you want and no one will ever take it beyond a verbal altercation, I'm letting you know that you're wrong. I'm letting you know that you're wrong. And there are a billion people on the planet, most of whom you don't know. You have no idea where they're from. You have no idea what they're going through. You have no idea what's on their mind right then in that moment. And you have no idea what kind of code they operate by, which means you have to watch how you talk. Okay, have I said that often enough here? You don't know when you're crossing somebody else's threshold. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is violence. Violence, yes, violence itself is a great thing. And this is not a metaphor. I really mean this. Number 2, violence keeps everybody in line. From what I just explained in point number 1. The threat of violence, or the understanding that violence can happen, keeps everybody in line. Along the lines of what I just said in point number 1, the underlying threat of violence makes everybody think just a little bit about your communication and stay on one accord with everybody else in the room. The reason why a country, for example, respects the borders of another country is because what? The reason why you expect another country's laws, rules, and citizens, why? Because the underlying threat of violence from one country to the other, if one country feels that they are not being respected despite attempts at fixing things verbally. If a citizen from another country goes over to a citizen from one country goes and visits another country, and for whatever reason, they just get their head chopped off, and sent back in a casket to the leader of the other country, it's a sign that says, oh, you all want problems. Okay, now we're going to have to handle this way because you decided to do something. Maybe we would ask first and say, hey, you need to make amends to us. You need to make amends here to make up for the wrongdoing that you did. And if you don't make amends the right way or fast enough, then we're going to make this physical. And there are many stories of back in the day, those of you who read about war history, Genghis Khan, for example, and going at countries because something was done that was deemed disrespectful. They said, hey, you need to make amends for the disrespect. And the people on the other side say, we're not going to make amends one way or another. They'll say, okay, then we got to get physical. And we're going to see how that goes. So again, violence. This is what keeps everybody in line. Knowing that that could happen is what keeps people from getting out of bounds. One reason the United States of America doesn't get attacked on our own soil too often. Well, one big reason is because you have an ocean to our east and an ocean to our west. So we can see you coming. That's one reason. But the other reason is because everyone knows about America's capability for violence and retaliation. We have a solid reputation. We haven't had to use it too often, but we have a pretty well-earned reputation for getting violent when we choose to. Now, can we agree? Last time we were overtly attacked on our own soil, overtly attacked, where we knew exactly who did it and they didn't even try to hide it, was December 7th, 1941. Many of you may not know the date, but you do know the occurrence. It's called Pearl Harbor, happened in Hawaii. The very next day after Pearl Harbor happened, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, also known as FDR, he declared war on Japan. So the United States government can move fast on certain subjects. When it comes to military, we can move fast. So within one day, we declared war on Japan. Now, there were many other battles in between that declaration of war and what ended up happening, that Japan was clearly losing, and these battles were happening over the Pacific Islands that the United States had retaken from Japan. But Japan didn't show any signs of unconditional surrender, even after the losses that they were taking on the battlefield. So the United States went to war with Japan, and we were in battles that most of you have never heard of. And the United States was winning most of these battles. The problem is Japan, despite this communication that we were physically kicking their ass after they attacked us on Pearl Harbor, they still didn't want to surrender. Japan was just being very, very rigid. And they were just unwilling to compromise, despite the fact that they were getting their ass kicked. And we can see this. And the United States realized, okay, well, we got a few options here. One was that we can just full scale invade Japan. We can just go to Japan, just invade their country and send our soldiers in. The problem is Japan had soldiers too, and we probably have lost hundreds of thousands of lives in the process of doing that. And we would have killed millions of Japanese in the process. So we would have lost 100,000, they would have lost millions. We still would have come out the victor, but it still would have been a lot of attrition on our side. We didn't want to do that. So here's what the United States decided to do. We decided that we wanted to force a quick surrender. And the way we were going to do this was to shock Japan into submission. And we wanted to do that without invading their land. So the United States asked a really good question. Now, again, I'm not saying I am completely co-signing what they did. Actually, it doesn't matter if I co-sign it or not because it already happened. What I'm saying is the United States asked a good question, which is how can we solve this while also solving this and make sure we get both at the same time? Because that's what they wanted. That's the reason why it was a good question. It was a good strategic question based on the position the United States saw themselves as in. We want to make them surrender while at the same time not costing ourselves too many lives. So, and they also wanted to send an indirect message to the Soviet Union at the time that the United States had new firepower that everybody should know about because the Soviet Union was a looming threat at the time. And the United States wanted to send a message to the whole world that if you fuck with us, here's what we're going to do. So do you know what happened? Some of you know what happened. Let me tell you what happened. The result were the dropping of two things known as the atomic bombs. The only two times this has ever happened in history was that these two atomic bombs were dropped on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and August 9th, respectively, in 1945. Understand that Pearl Harbor happened in 1941, folks. It was 4 years later, nearly 4 years later before we dropped the atomic bombs. There's a whole lot of things that happened in between. And what happened in between was a whole lot of communication. We were trying to communicate with them on a physical level, but on a lesser physical level, like, hey, y'all can't win here. So how about you just make amends for what you did and just surrender and we'll stop. Japan didn't want to stop. And we said, okay, Hiroshima happened, Nagasaki happened. All of you have probably heard of those two towns, even though you probably couldn't point them out on the map. Everybody knows what they're about. That's where we dropped the atom bombs, completely decimated their towns, basically wiped those towns off the map effectively at that time. And Japan surrendered, guess what? Within 1 week, the war was over. 1 week. 4 years of fighting, they didn't get the point. When we stepped up our communication through increased violence, within 1 week, the entire conflict was over. The entire war ended. World War II ended within a week after we dropped those atomic bombs. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? So it's not just a matter of going from talking to violence. It's a matter of levels of violence. There's a level of violence when, as a parent, your kid is not listening, so you might grab them by the shoulder just to make sure they hear what you're saying. There's another level of violence where you might forcefully make your kids sit down. There's another level of violence where you might pull out a belt and whoop your kid's ass. There's levels to this shit. Do you understand? And this is what America did. Those bombs have kept the rest of the world, again, this is 1945, folks. Those bombs have kept the rest of the world pretty much in check for the last 80 years. As far as directly attacking us and letting us know that you did it. Nobody else has done it in 80 years. Now, of course, we had the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Those were more covert, where we don't know exactly who did it, and they weren't waving their hands and saying that, hey, it was us, at least according to official records. And we went to war over that as well. Now, who do we go to war with? What was the premise behind that war, and did it make any sense? Those are questions that we're not going to address here today. But the overall point here is that when people know you're capable of violence, and they know that you will use that capability, you're less likely to even need it, because most people don't want to test it. All right, even a bully looks for victims who don't want to fight. Even a bully who thinks they could beat up everybody in the schoolyard is going to go after the person who's not going to make them fight, because the bully doesn't want to have to go through the fight because there's effort in a fight. But what if you just can take somebody who's going to let you take it? That's a lot easier. And America hasn't been fucked with for 80 years because everybody knows what we might do. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is why violence is a great thing. Number 3. No one has a problem with violence when it's used for your protection or if you see a justified reason for using it. So, all of you ladies out there, I've heard this from several females and also several feminine energy men who I also often refer to as pussies, saying something like violence is never justified and there's never a good reason for violence. Okay, let's look at a hypothetical situation, because every once in a while on social media I see somebody say this stupid shit. Let's say you're home alone by yourself, females. And men out there, let's say you have a woman in your life, a daughter, a sister, a mother, or a wife or girlfriend. Let's say they're at home alone by themselves, and it's just the woman and maybe some children in the house, young children who can't physically do anything. And there's some crazy man at the front door of that home trying to break into the house and kick down the door. You literally hear him kicking the door, trying to break it down. What do you do? Now, the question is for the ladies. Now, if you're a man, what would you want the woman to do? If you're a woman, what would you do? Number 1. And number 2, if you're a man, what would you want the woman in your life, mother, sister, daughter, girlfriend, wife, what would you want them to do in that situation? Assuming that this woman does not have access to a gun, you probably want that woman to call the police, or call her brother, or call her husband, or call her father, or call the next door neighbor who is a man. All for what reason? What is that woman calling a man for? Hoping that the man will come and save the woman from what? What looks to be impending violence. Is this true or not? And if the woman has to use, and if the man, who gets called, the dad, the uncle, the next door neighbor, the police officer who shows up to confront the man who's trying to kick in that woman's door, if that man needs to use violence in the process of stopping the attacker, let me ask a question. Would you be okay with it? Ladies who are listening to this, if you're a single woman, you live alone by yourself, if a man was trying to kick down your door and you called the cops and a male cop came in and beat the shit out of the guy who was trying to kick down your door, would that violence be okay? Yes or no? Of course it would. Ladies, if you have a man trying to beat down your door and he has a gun in his hand, and you call your next door neighbor who's a man, and your next door neighbor comes out of his house and uses his gun to shoot the guy who's trying to break into your house, would that violence be justified? Of course it would. So miss me with the bullshit about there's never a reason to use violence. All right, we all can come up with a justification to use violence. If someone runs up to you as a man and punches you in the face in the middle of the mall, and you were to get up and punch him in the face and beat the shit out of him, is your violence justified? Yes, it is. You call it self-defense. It's still violence. Self-defense is still violence. Violence is not a crime. It depends on how it's used, but violence itself, in and of itself, is not a crime. It depends on the context. So anybody saying that violence is wrong in any case is saying a bunch of bullshit, who clearly has never been punched in their face before, because if you get punched in your face, you probably want to punch the person back. So you're not okay with violence then? Oh, just checking. See, if you did have a gun, ladies, and you pulled out the gun and shot the person who was trying to intrude into your house, would that be justified violence? In most states, many states, it would be, depending on how your lawyers try to argue the case. So miss me with this virtue signaling about anybody having a problem with violence. No one has a problem with violence when the violence is used in the proper context. That's the point that I'm making here today. let's recap today's class, which is why violence is actually a great thing. So sometimes you hear people saying some stupid shit like violence is wrong under any circumstance. No, it's not. Number one, violence is the bottom line of all human interaction. What keeps people in line is violence. The reason men dominate the world, despite this oncoming nonsense of feminism, which is only being preserved by pussy men, is because the bottom line of life is violence. And if all men and all women got into one big conflict, women would cease to exist. Actually, it's actually not true. What would happen is the feminist women would cease to exist, and the men who the women who understand that they can't win would wave the white flag and they would be saved, where all the other women who think they're equal to a man would get annihilated and get their skulls stomped in. That's what would actually happen. So the bottom line of all human interaction is violence, and the people most capable of violence are men. That's why the world is run by men. And this whole concept of destroying the patriarchy is a nonsense concept because of what I just explained. You cannot destroy something you don't have the physical capability of beating. So how can you destroy a patriarchy when the people in the patriarchy are all men who are more capable of violence than anybody else? Who's going to destroy them? Aliens? Point number two. I lost my place where I was here in my notes. Point number two, violence keeps everybody in line. Along the lines of what you've heard in point number one, underlying threat of violence keeps everyone in line because it keeps everybody communicating on the same page, keeps everybody on the same accord. If you know there's one guy in the room who can kick everybody's ass, everybody is careful how they talk to that one guy. If you put a lion in the room with every other animal you can think of, most of them, not all of them, but most animals, then all those animals are aware of the lion. Even if the lion's not doing anything, the lion could be laying in the corner sleeping. Everybody's aware of that lion. Why? Because the lion is most capable of violence and killing everybody in the room. That's why people respect the lion. Everybody understand this. And number three, no one has a problem with violence when it is used for your protection or if you see a justified reason for using that violence. So whenever people are talking about violence is never good in any case, okay, if an intruder was trying to kick in your door and your husband got out of bed and beat the shit out the intruder, as soon as he opened the door and beat the shit out of that intruder, do you still have a problem with violence? Of course you don't. So again, this nonsense claim that some of you picked up from some liberal university or from some bullshit preschool YouTube video you've been watching, delete this idea, perish the thought. All that said, folks, work on your game university. All right, you want to learn to step your game up and be the highest level version of yourself to where you can be violent against mediocrity, violent against, the word just escaped me. Violence against, man, the word just escaped me what I was trying to say. Violence against delay, violence against inaction. I still can't think of the word, but I'll get back to it. Work on your game university. That I didn't forget. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Have me as your direct coach. Let's get to work. Work on your game. Dre all day.